I was halfway through lifting my fork when my husband laughed and said our son embarrasses him, the metal freezing midair under the dining room lights. Still, I didn't react, just set the fork down carefully, letting the scrape against the plate sound louder than my heartbeat. As the chatter continued, that sharp scrape echoed in my head, each laugh around the table polishing his words into something permanent. While I watched his family nod along, I understood that silence had been my permission, and the table had been my witness. The same fork told me this wasn't ignorance anymore, it was cruelty, dressed as confidence. That's when I finally spoke, calmly, because reputations break the same way plates do, once and in front of everyone. Before we start, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. If you enjoy the story, please hit like, subscribe, and join our community. It really helps us grow. The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting long, pale streaks across the floor, illuminating the dust on the counter and the scattered cereal bowls. The fridge hummed softly in the background, almost like it was trying to soothe the tension that always seemed to settle in the room. I stood there, watching Leo spin in his chair, his hands flapping as he hummed a song about the stars, his latest obsession. His Stegosaurus t-shirt swirled around him, the bright colors a contrast to the dullness of the space. I loved these mornings, quiet, safe, before the chaos of the day, but today, something felt different. Ryan strode in, looking crisp in his shirt and tie, his phone already in his hand, scrolling through messages. His eyes barely skimmed over Leo before a frown settled on his face. I didn't need to see his expression to know it was coming. "Leo?" Ryan's voice was sharp, cutting through the hum of the fridge. "Take that off. You're 7, not 3. Leo froze mid-spin, the joyful humming dying in his throat. He stared down at the Stegosaurus shirt like it was an alien artifact. The headphones hanging around his neck, the ones that kept the hallway noise at bay, seemed to be bothering Ryan too. I stepped in gently, instinctively, as I always did. "Ryan, the shirt helps him feel safe, and the headphones keep the noise from overwhelming him. You know this." He didn't look up from his phone as he snatched the headphones off Leo's neck, his fingers tight with impatience. "Safe? Really? He's too old for this. We're turning him into a freak." His voice dropped to a mutter, like the words were something too shameful to be fully spoken. I felt the heat of it rising in my chest, burning my face. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. As a psychologist, I know what helps him. I could feel the words pushing against the tightness in my throat. They came out too strong, too much, like I was trying to justify myself to someone who never listened. Ryan finally looked at me, his eyes narrowed, and the moment stretched between us heavy with something I couldn't name. "You're his mom, not his doctor." His words hit like a slap. "And my son is not going to be the weird kid everyone stares at." His tone was dismissive, dismissing everything that was real about our son, everything that made Leo. I turned my gaze to Leo, who was standing still now, holding his hands together in his lap, his eyes wide and confused. His little body was tense, waiting for a response. Ryan yanked open the closet door with a little too much force, rummaging through the clothes. "Get him a normal shirt, Lily. One that doesn't make him look like some kind of circus act." I watched Leo's face crumple. His eyes flickered between me and Ryan, searching for something I couldn't give him, something that wasn't hurt. And then, in that small, fragile voice, he whispered, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I swallowed the knot in my throat, forcing a smile that didn't feel real. I knelt down to his level, brushing my fingers through his messy hair. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect." But my words felt hollow, even to me. Ryan didn't care, of course. He tapped his watch, his impatience growing. "We're late because of this nonsense," he muttered, the words dripping with disdain. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched them leave. Ryan's hand was tight around Leo's shoulder, forcing him to walk a little faster. Leo's steps were small, almost like he was trying to disappear inside himself. I stood there in the doorway, the morning light now duller, colder. My coffee, forgotten in my hand, had gone lukewarm. I stared at them both, feeling a tightness in my chest. When did Ryan stop seeing Leo as our son and start seeing him as a reflection of his own image? When did he stop understanding that Leo needed love, not shame? I stood there for a long time, the silence of the kitchen now louder than ever. The sounds of the world outside seemed to fade, and all I could hear was the soft hum of the fridge, a reminder that some things, some broken things, could never be fixed with a slap of a hand or a harsh word. Today I know that moment was the first crack in something I couldn't ignore anymore. The first moment I saw Ryan for who he really was, the man who saw his son's differences as a burden instead of a gift. And that was when I realized how much I would have to fight, not just for Leo, but for myself too. The backyard was chaos. Kids running, squealing, their laughter mingling with the sound of Nerf guns popping and the blaring music from a Bluetooth speaker. The air smelled like grilled hot dogs and sunscreen, a sharp combination that seemed to clog my senses. Leo was clinging to my leg, his body tense, his hands pressed to his ears. The noise was already too much for him. I knelt down, offering his noise-canceling headphones, the ones that always helped. But before Leo could even take them from my hand, Ryan snatched them away. "Not here," he snapped. "You're not some fragile little alien." I felt my pulse spike. The words hit like a slap, but I forced myself to stay calm. Barbara, standing nearby, let out a nervous laugh. "Kids these days are too coddled," she muttered, probably hoping I wouldn't hear. I tried to block it out, but the judgment was clear. Always was. Leo didn't fit their perfect idea of what a child should be, and that was my fault. The chaos grew louder as the cake came out, the singing starting, and Leo's hands flew back to his ears. His face went pale, and I saw the panic in his eyes. I rushed to comfort him, but Ryan was already there, grabbing Leo's arm too tight, hissing, "Stop it, you're making a scene." I froze. Leo yanked his arm away, his sobs loud and raw, echoing through the yard. Some relatives stared, some pretended not to see. Ryan stood back, arms crossed, like he wasn't the father of the child sobbing at his feet. "He does this all the time," Ryan said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's exhausting." I wanted to scream. I wanted to make him see what he was doing to Leo. But I just stood there, watching my son crumble under the weight of Ryan's indifference. Later, in the kitchen, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Why didn't you help him?" My voice was low, but there was an edge to it, something I couldn't hide anymore. Ryan didn't even look up from his beer. If he's old enough to embarrass himself, he's old enough to learn. Those words cut through me like glass. "You make both of us look bad," he added, as if it was somehow my fault that Leo was struggling. I didn't have the energy to argue. I just stared at him, feeling the weight of his indifference suffocating me. The drive home was silent except for Leo's soft, even breaths in the back seat. His cheeks were streaked with tears, but at least he was safe now. At least he wasn't in the middle of the storm. I scrolled through my phone, trying to push the anger down. An email from an old attorney friend caught my eye, something about catching up on equity. Without thinking, I starred it. I didn't know why. I looked at Leo in the rearview mirror, his small face peaceful, finally free of the chaos. Something inside me snapped. No more. He wouldn't be shamed for existing. I would fight for him, no matter what it took. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us, casting a sterile, flickering glow over the small conference room at Leo's elementary school. The air smelled faintly of coffee, stale paper, and something else. Tension, maybe. Papers rustled as they were shuffled, pens tapped nervously against notepads. Leo's teacher, a woman with kind eyes that tried to hide her concern, sat opposite me, while the school psychologist, a quiet man with glasses, sat next to her. I could feel their eyes on me, as if waiting for me to break the silence. We weren't here because Leo had just failed a test or didn't understand something. No, this was different. This was about my son, my beautiful, brilliant boy who had never fit neatly into a box. And as much as I hated it, I knew this meeting was inevitable. It was time for the label. The counselor cleared her throat. Based on the evaluation results, we're seeing some behaviors consistent with the autism spectrum and some sensory processing challenges. I nodded, the words feeling familiar, like an old friend I had both dreaded and longed to hear. The relief that came with knowing we weren't crazy, that there was a reason for Leo's struggles, was overwhelming. But alongside it was grief. The weight of knowing that my son, the one who had always been so full of life and curiosity, was going to have to fight harder than other kids to be understood. I tried to hold back the sting of tears, but it was there, just beneath the surface. Before I could say anything, Ryan leaned back in his chair, a loud scoff escaping his lips. "We're not slapping a label on him because he doesn't like loud noises." His words felt like a slap to my face, the dismissiveness dripping from them like acid. The teacher glanced at me, her eyes unsure. It was as if she was waiting for me to explain, to apologize for the man sitting beside me, the one who couldn't even pretend to understand. I didn't have time to respond before Ryan went on, his voice loud, dismissive. "You and your little clinic brain love this stuff. Out in the real world, they just call it being weird." I could feel my hands start to tremble, but I forced myself to stay calm. "A formal diagnosis would help us get him the support he needs," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though it felt like I was talking to a wall. "Occupational therapy, social skills groups, classroom accommodations. These could make a huge difference for him." Ryan cut me off, his tone sharp. "I don't need you to make him some kind of project. He's my son. He doesn't need therapy. He needs to toughen up." His eyes were hard, and I could hear the disgust in his voice when he said therapy. He didn't want our son to be one of those kids, the ones that other people pitied or stared at. The school psychologist, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up gently, trying to offer some perspective. "Leo has been eating lunch alone sometimes. It seems like he's overwhelmed by the noise in the cafeteria." Ryan scoffed, his arms crossing over his chest. He should man up. Kids can smell weakness. If he's too sensitive, he'll never make it. I felt my nails dig into the palms of my hands as I clenched my fists beneath the table. His words were like daggers, each one aimed directly at Leo's heart. And worse, they were aimed at me, too, at the mother who had tried so hard to protect her son. The meeting wrapped up, and as soon as we were in the parking lot, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why didn't you help him?" I demanded, my voice shaking with frustration. "Why didn't you say anything during the meeting? You just sat there making everything worse." Ryan didn't even look at me as he slammed the car door shut. "I'm just trying to keep you from turning him into a diagnosis," he said, as though that somehow made sense. "You embarrassed me in there, acting like you were some kind of doctor instead of my wife." His words hit harder than any punch. I wasn't just the mother of his child. I wasn't even his partner in this. I was a doctor, a hobbyist, a label, nothing more. That night, I sat in bed, the soft glow of my laptop screen, the only light in the room. My hands shook as I pulled out my notebook. I started writing. Everything Ryan had said, everything that had happened. I wasn't sure why I was documenting it, but in that moment, it felt like the only thing I could do to take back some control, to fight back against the gaslighting, the undermining. The act of writing made his words feel less powerful, less true. Today, I know that night was when I started to see Ryan for who he truly was, the man who couldn't see his son for who he was. And it was the beginning of the quiet realization that I would have to protect Leo, even if it meant doing it alone. It was a Thursday evening, just another quiet night at home. Leo was on the living room floor, lost in his Legos, his little hands moving swiftly as he built. I picked up scattered pieces from around the room, the soft click of plastic against plastic the only sound, until Ryan's voice cut through the silence. He was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables a little too loudly. His phone sat propped on the counter, speakerphone on as he talked to his mother. I barely thought about it until I heard my name. Ryan sighed dramatically, his voice carrying over the chopping. I don't even know if I want to bring Leo. Last time he had a meltdown. Honestly, Mom, he embarrasses me. I can't have clients seeing that if they stop by. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Embarrasses me. He wasn't talking about me. He was talking about our son. Leo. Barbara's voice crackled through the phone, clucking her tongue. Maybe it's better for everyone if Leo stays home. Some kids just aren't meant for big gatherings. You should focus on your career, Ryan. You could use a night alone with him, she suggested casually, like Leo's needs were just an inconvenience to be swept aside. Ryan agreed too quickly. Exactly. Lily won't love it, but she'll get over it. She thinks his quirks are beautiful or whatever. His tone made the word beautiful sound disgusting. I could feel my blood boil. How dare he? I couldn't stay silent any longer. I walked into the kitchen, my chest tight with anger. Did you really just call our son embarrassing? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but the words felt like they were shaking the entire room. Ryan's face twisted into something cold, as if I'd just ruined his perfect moment. He flipped the phone off speaker with an angry swipe, then hissed, "You're overhearing things that aren't meant for you," before turning back to Barbara and muttering, "We'll talk later." He finally looked at me, eyes flashing with irritation. "You're making this about you. I meant his behavior, not the kid." The distinction between behavior and kid was like a slap to my face, as if my son's struggles weren't part of who he was. I stood there, the words hanging in the air, feeling smaller with every passing second. Ryan stormed out of the kitchen, muttering something about clearing his head. I was left standing there, the room suddenly feeling colder as the silence stretched between us. I went to the living room, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. I logged into the brokerage account tied to the startup I had sold, the one I'd barely touched in years. The numbers stared back at me. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's shadow. Instead, I felt a spark of something I hadn't in a long time. Possibility. The realization hit me, quiet but sharp. I had the power to make a choice. I could protect my son even if I had to do it alone. Today, I know that moment was the first step toward reclaiming my life. The moment I stopped feeling trapped by Ryan's shame and started building a future where Leo's worth wasn't determined by someone else's embarrassment. It was late. The house quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher, its rhythmic whirring filling the space with a sound I'd usually find comforting. But tonight, it felt like the world was holding its breath. I stood in the hallway, staring at Leo's medication bottle, empty, like it had been for days. I was so used to taking care of things for Leo that I hadn't even noticed it was missing. And tomorrow was the school trip. He needed his meds. Ryan was in the shower, his usual routine after work, the bathroom door slightly ajar with steam leaking into the hallway. His briefcase, sitting innocently by the door, caught my eye. It was always there when he was home, like a forgotten accessory. His office on the go, he'd called it. But tonight, something gnawed at me, something I couldn't ignore. I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew I wasn't supposed to, but I couldn't help myself. I hesitated, the weight of my decision heavy in my chest, then unzipped the case. The soft crinkle of the fabric and the slight clink of something inside was louder than I expected. Inside, neatly organized, was a folder labeled Summer Plans. I told myself it was just another camp brochure for Leo, another distraction for Ryan to throw his weight behind, another attempt to fix our son. I could already feel the resentment bubbling in my throat as I flipped it open. But instead of camp brochures, I was met with a glossy packet titled Oak Ridge Behavior Academy, Transforming Troubled Youth. My heart skipped a beat and my stomach dropped. I kept flipping through the pages, each one more suffocating than the last. There were restrictive daily schedules, a no-contact adjustment period, testimonials about breaking defiance and ending meltdowns. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. This wasn't a place for neurodivergent children to get the support they needed. This was a boot camp, a place designed to crush their spirit. The last few pages were even worse. Completed enrollment forms, Leo's full name and medical details, everything neatly filled out. But it was the reason for enrollment that made my blood run cold. Socially inappropriate, emotionally immature, resistant to discipline. Mother coddles and undermines structure. The word mother slapped me across the face. It was as though I wasn't even there, just an obstacle to be pushed aside. Then I saw it, the signature page, and there, in shaky ink, was my name, my signature. But it wasn't mine. I could feel the blood rush to my face as I realized what Ryan had done. He'd forged my consent. The date was 2 weeks ago, a night I'd spent in bed with a migraine, completely unaware that he was making decisions for our son behind my back. I flipped the page, my hand trembling, and there it was, a payment receipt. A hefty deposit pulled from our joint savings. The summer plans had been taken care of all right. An email printout confirmed Leo's spot in an 8-week intensive program, starting the minute school ended. The last page was the worst, an email to Barbara, a message that made my stomach churn. Don't tell Lily yet, she'll freak. But by the fall, Leo will be fixed. He'll finally be someone I can be proud to introduce. The words swam before my eyes, my vision blurring. Fixed. I couldn't breathe. I quickly pulled my phone from my pocket, hands shaking as I snapped photos of the entire document. The sound of the camera shutter was deafening in the quiet of the house. Then, with trembling fingers, I sent everything to an encrypted backup, just in case. Ryan walked out of the bathroom, humming, his towel around his waist. He asked if I'd seen his watch, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Instead, I texted an old colleague from my startup days. Hey, do you still know a good disability rights lawyer? As I hit send, I knew something had changed. Ryan had crossed a line, and for the first time, I wasn't going to let him control the narrative. Today, I understand that moment was the first time I took real action. The first time I realized that I had more power than I'd given myself credit for, and I was done staying quiet. The small office smelled of coffee and paper, the scent sharp but grounding. Legal pads were stacked neatly on the desk, an order that made the chaos in my head feel even more overwhelming. Denise Park, the lawyer I had finally mustered the courage to reach out to, sat across from me, a calm presence, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I handed her my phone, the photos of the Oak Ridge paperwork, and my notebook filled with dates, notes, and Ryan's comments. I had expected to be told there was nothing I could do. I had braced myself for more helplessness. But when Denise scanned the documents and looked back at me, her face hardening, I realized something had shifted. "He forged your signature?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with disbelief. "And he's sending your son to an unregulated facility?" I nodded, my chest tightening. "I didn't even know about it until I found the paperwork." Denise pulled up a quick search on her computer, her fingers moving swiftly over the keys. The words that appeared on the screen made my stomach churn. Oak Ridge Behavior Academy. Lawsuits, complaints, abuse. She leaned back, her eyes focused. "This isn't help for your son. This is a boot camp designed to break kids, to control them. Your husband is risking everything to fix a problem that doesn't even exist." I felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. It wasn't just that Ryan had gone behind my back. He had made a decision that was not only illegal, but also cruel. Denise continued, her voice calm but firm. "Forging your signature on medical or educational decisions is fraud. Sending Leo away without your consent would violate custody rights. And using joint funds for something like this without consulting you, that's financial misconduct." I sat there, stunned. All this time, I'd let Ryan control the narrative. I'd allowed myself to doubt my instincts, to feel like I was overreacting. But hearing it laid out so clearly, I realized just how far I'd allowed him to push me. "I've stayed because I'm scared," I admitted, my voice small. "Scared of the divorce, scared of being alone, and the financial part, I don't know if I can provide for Leo by myself. Denise softened, leaning forward. I get it, but you don't have to be afraid anymore. You have more control than you think. Tell me about your assets. I hesitated before speaking. The startup sale wasn't huge, but I've kept the funds in a trust. Her eyes widened. Lily, you're fine. More than fine. The weight of her words settled over me like a blanket I didn't realize I needed. She went on, laying out a plan. First, you block any attempt to send Leo away by notifying the school and Oak Ridge of your non-consent. Document everything. Keep Leo close, and prepare for a custody battle. These papers are your key. I stood up to leave, feeling something stir inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Direction. Purpose. Ryan thought I was stuck. He had no idea I'd just found my way out. Today I understand that was the moment I stopped being a victim of his control and started fighting for my son. Dr. Ellis's office felt like a refuge, a calm little bubble in the middle of everything else. The soft lighting, the scent of lavender lingering in the air, the low hum of quiet music playing in the background. It was all meant to make the space feel safe. Leo gravitated toward the basket of squishy balls and the plastic model of the solar system, his favorite place in the room. Within minutes, his body relaxed, the tension leaving his shoulders as he settled into his world of toy rockets and planets. I sat in the chair across from Dr. Ellis, my hands tight in my lap as I tried to explain the whirlwind of chaos that had become my life. It felt almost surreal, saying the words out loud to someone who wasn't a friend or family member, someone who wouldn't just nod along to appease me. I took a breath. There have been meltdowns at family events, especially when the noise gets too much. Ryan's been, dismissive. He says things like, Leo's embarrassing, that he's too much. And then there's Oak Ridge. I found out he's been planning to send Leo there, to some behavioral academy without my consent. Dr. Ellis nodded, her gaze steady as she listened. Leo was building a tower with the toy rockets, his soft voice explaining the phases of the moon as he stacked them carefully. I watched him, my heart aching. How could anyone see this child, this beautiful, brilliant boy, and think there was something wrong with him? How could Ryan? I slid the photos across the table, the images of the Oak Ridge enrollment forms, the forged signature, the list of problems Ryan had written down. Her fingers brushed over the paperwork, her brow furrowing as she took it all in. When she reached the last page, her mouth tightened. This isn't a good environment for a child like Leo, she said softly, and your consent is required. I let out a shaky breath, grateful that someone finally understood. I've tried to tell him that. I've tried to tell Ryan that Leo needs support, not punishment. But it's like he can't see Leo for who he is. All he sees is a problem to fix. Dr. Ellis set the papers down, her tone steady but firm. It's not about fixing him. It's about understanding him. Leo's behaviors are not flaws to be erased. They are parts of who he is, and they need to be respected. She paused, looking at me with a quiet intensity. I'll do a full assessment. Sensory profile, ASD evaluation, anxiety scales. I'll make sure we have a complete picture of Leo's needs. I nodded, grateful but still uneasy. There was a part of me that wasn't sure any of this would be enough to change Ryan's mind. He'd made up his own version of reality, one where Leo was a burden. I wasn't sure how I could break through that. Dr. Ellis seemed to read my thoughts. I'll also attend the upcoming school IEP meeting. I can advocate for Leo, help the team understand why punishing meltdowns is harmful, and I'll make clear notes about the parental dynamics so that they understand the full picture. Her voice softened. You're not alone in this. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Not alone. It was the first time in weeks I felt like someone was on my side, like I wasn't fighting this battle by myself. Over the next few sessions, Dr. Ellis watched Ryan in the waiting room, her observations sharp and calm. Ryan's impatience with Leo was hard to miss, The way he rolled his eyes when Leo hummed or paced, the sharpness in his voice when Leo didn't make eye contact. "Sit still," he would tell him. The words harsh, full of irritation. Dr. Ellis took notes. Father expresses shame around child's behaviors. It was strange to hear her say it so plainly, to have someone put words to what I'd felt for so long but couldn't fully articulate. After one session, as Leo played in the corner, Dr. Ellis pulled me aside. "How safe do you feel standing up to him?" she asked, her voice gentle but pointed. I hesitated, my hands twisting in my lap. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of the fallout, but I'm more scared of what will happen if Leo ends up in a place like Oak Ridge." She nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. But here's the good news. You're not alone." I left her office that day with a copy of her initial evaluation, a letter stating that forced enrollment in Oak Ridge would be contraindicated for Leo, and a sense of relief I hadn't felt in months. For the first time, I wasn't just fighting against Ryan's control. I had a strategy, a backup, and most importantly, I had proof that I wasn't crazy. Today, I know that was the moment I realized the depth of my power. It wasn't just my knowledge anymore. It was my network, my ability to build something real. And Ryan didn't know it yet, but I wasn't going to let him destroy our son. Not anymore. It was supposed to be a normal family dinner. Spaghetti, garlic bread, the soft clink of forks against plates. But the tension was thick, hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Leo, oblivious, was animatedly talking about planets, his fingers fluttering as he stimmed with excitement. His little face was covered in sauce, but his joy was contagious. I smiled at him, grateful for these moments of innocence. Ryan's jaw tightened every time Leo's hands flapped, his gaze flicking with irritation. I could feel the disapproval in the way he clenched his jaw, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Not yet. Ryan cleared his throat, then dropped the bomb. "I've made arrangements for summer," he said casually, like he hadn't just turned our son's future upside down. He pulled out the Oak Ridge brochure, the one I had been dreading, and held it up like a magic trick. I could feel my stomach churn, the knots tightening as I looked at the glossy paper. I knew exactly what it was. Leo's excitement didn't fade. "Is that a space camp, Dad?" he asked innocently, unaware of the world about to shatter around him. I had to stop this. "No, Leo, it's not a space camp. And we're not sending you there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to keep the panic from showing. Ryan's face darkened, and the smile he had on his face disappeared. "What do you mean? I'm not saying that. I've already made arrangements." His words hit like a slap. I had to act now. "I've seen the lawsuits, Ryan. Dr. Ellis says it's harmful. I do not consent." Ryan's face twisted in disbelief, his eyes narrowing. "You went behind my back," he spat, his voice rising. "You always do this. Undermine me. Make me look like the bad guy." I felt my heart drop into my stomach, but I stayed calm. "You forged my signature," I said quietly, my voice unwavering. Ryan scoffed, dismissing me like I was nothing. "I knew you'd overreact. I saved us both time. I'm his father. I get to make decisions." His words were sharp, dismissive, as if Leo's well-being was just an inconvenience to be solved. I could feel the anger rising, but I forced it down. Leo didn't need to see this. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a slight scrape. "Leo, take your plate to your room. Put on your headphones, okay?" Leo nodded, oblivious to the tension in the air, and walked away, his small footsteps echoing in the hallway. Once he was gone, Ryan's voice dropped low, menacing. "If you pull this kind of stunt in front of my family, I'll go for full custody. I'll make sure everyone knows you're alienating Leo from me and indulging his weaknesses." I stood there, my body shaking, but I didn't let the fear show. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice quiet and controlled. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. Oak Ridge has been notified I do not consent. If you try to send Leo away, I'll treat it as kidnapping." Ryan froze, his face draining of color for just a moment before he regained control. He stormed off, shouting into the phone to his mother, calling me out of control, threatening to ruin everything. In my room, I sat down at my desk and sent an email to Denise. "He just threatened full custody. We need to move up our timeline." Today, I know that moment was the turning point. I wasn't just defending Leo anymore. I was taking control. Ryan had underestimated me, and I wasn't backing down. The dinner table was alive with chatter, the clink of silverware against plates, the scent of roast beef and wine hanging in the air. It should have been a normal family gathering, but nothing ever felt normal when Leo was involved. He sat between me and Jenna, playing with a small rocket toy I'd let him bring. His little hands flitted around the toy, stimming lightly as he muttered about the planets, completely unaware of the tension creeping through the room. Ryan, however, noticed. His jaw tightened with every flick of Leo's fingers, every hum that escaped his lips. He didn't hide his irritation, but he kept it under control. Barely. I could feel it, though. The simmering disdain, the embarrassment he was trying so hard to bury. Ryan cleared his throat, loud enough to cut through Leo's excited babbling. "I've made arrangements for summer," he said, his tone casual, but I knew better. My stomach twisted. He pulled out the Oak Ridge brochure, holding it up like a trump card. My heart dropped into my stomach. I knew exactly what that brochure meant. Leo, ever hopeful, looked up from his toy. "Is that a space camp, Dad?" I felt a rush of heat in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "No, Leo, it's not a space camp. We're not sending you there." Ryan's face darkened. "What do you mean we're not sending him? I've already made the arrangements." He slapped the brochure down on the table, his eyes flashing. "I've seen the lawsuits," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling up inside me. "Dr. Ellis says it's harmful. I do not consent to this." Ryan's face twisted with disbelief. "You went behind my back," he hissed. "You always do this. Undermine me, make me look like the bad guy." I swallowed, my voice remaining calm, though every word felt like a punch. "You forged my signature." He scoffed, waving me off like it was nothing. "I knew you'd overreact. I saved us both time. I'm his father. I get to make decisions." My heart was pounding now. Leo shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face starting to mirror my tension. I couldn't let this continue. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Leo, take your plate to your room. Put on your headphones, okay?" Leo looked up at me, confusion in his eyes, but he nodded and quietly left the room. As soon as Leo was out of earshot, Ryan leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "If you pull this kind of stunt in front of my family, I'll go for full custody. I'll make sure everyone knows you're alienating Leo from me, indulging his weaknesses." I felt a cold wave of anger wash over me. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. Oak Ridge has been notified I do not consent. If you try to send Leo away, I'll treat it as kidnapping." Ryan froze. For a moment, I saw shock on his face, followed quickly by fury. He knocked his chair over, his face red with rage. "You're ruining everything. This is about a few tantrums," he yelled. I didn't flinch. The truth had already been spoken. From across the room, I heard the faint sound of a phone recording. Ryan was too busy storming off, calling his mother to notice. In the silence that followed, I could hear Leo's soft footsteps retreating to his room. I took a deep breath, typing an email to Denise. "He just threatened full custody. We need to move up our timeline." Today, I know that was the moment I truly took control. By the time morning came, everything had already shifted. Ryan wasn't home. He had stormed out, his angry footsteps echoing down the hallway the night before. The house felt too quiet without him, like the silence was waiting for the inevitable fallout. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I was ready for it either. But when I saw the first text, my stomach dropped. Ryan's words were sharp, venomous. He accused me of alienating him, of humiliating him in front of his family. Funny how his story skipped over the part where he forged my name to send Leo to Oak Ridge. That part didn't fit with his narrative of being the wronged father, the good guy just trying to help his son. "Vindictive," he called me. "You're using Leo against me, Lily. You blindsided me in front of everyone." The words stung, but they also felt familiar, like a pattern I had been trapped in for years. His accusations were always louder than the truth. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the lies or the fact that he truly believed them. But it wasn't long before I received another round of messages, this time from Barbara. "Everyone makes mistakes," she wrote. "A good wife protects her husband's reputation." There it was again, her attempt to make me feel guilty for exposing Ryan's ugly truths. And then she had to add it, the casual dismissal of Leo. "You know, Leo's just sensitive," she wrote, as if his distress was something he needed to get over, like it was his fault. I felt the bile rise in my throat as I read her words. I had to take a moment to collect myself before responding. I snapped a quick photo of the forged signature page and the Oak Ridge lawsuits, attaching them to my message. "My first job is protecting Leo, not your son's ego," I wrote, my fingers trembling. And with that, I muted the family group chat. I couldn't bear to hear their excuses anymore. The guilt, the gaslighting, it was all piling up. But I wasn't going to be quiet about it anymore. Later that day, at school pickup, Jenna quietly approached me. She had always been the one to stay out of the drama, the one who tried to keep the peace. But today, she couldn't stay silent. "I didn't know about Oak Ridge," she said, her voice low, almost ashamed. "I didn't know he'd said those things about Leo." She paused, glancing over her shoulder, making sure no one was listening. The look on Leo's face when Ryan joked about him at dinner, it hurt my stomach, Lily. I can't believe he's treated him like that. The words hit me harder than I expected. Jenna, Ryan's sister, had never once spoken out against him. For her to say this, to admit how wrong he was like a crack in the foundation of everything I had tried to ignore. "I'll testify if you need me," she added, her voice steady now. "I've seen how he treats Leo behind closed doors." A small but significant crack in the family wall. That night, Ryan's words were everywhere. Mutual friends were getting his version of events, the story where I was the villain, the one who set him up. "She only married me for my name," he told them, trying to rewrite history to fit his narrative. And of course, some people believed it. Some people always would. It was easier to believe the story where I was the manipulative one, the martyr blowing up a few tantrums into something bigger than it really was. Denise called the next morning, just as I was sorting through the mess of texts and emails, trying to make sense of everything. She told me to keep documenting, to stay calm. "Don't respond emotionally," she advised, her voice steady. "Brace yourself. The real battle is in court, where evidence matters more than gossip." I sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by years of texts, Ryan's sweet promises, his manipulations, the red flags I'd ignored. I had minimized them for so long, convinced myself that it was just part of being a wife, that the things he said weren't as bad as they seemed. Now, looking back at it all, I realized how long I'd been letting myself believe in his version of reality. Today, I know that the moment I started documenting everything was the moment I truly started taking back control. I wasn't just trying to protect Leo anymore. I was fighting for myself, too. The courtroom was small and beige, the kind of place that felt more like a holding cell than a place for justice. The air was thick with the hum of whispered conversations, the shuffle of papers, and the rustling of seats as people adjusted uncomfortably. I could feel the heat of it all pressing down on me as I sat beside Denise, clutching Dr. Ellis's report in my hands. The paper felt like a lifeline, its weight grounding me as I tried to steady my breathing. Leo wasn't there. I'd made sure of that. He was safe at Jenna's, away from this nightmare, far from the coldness of this place that made everything feel even more suffocating. Ryan sat across from me, beside his sharp-suited lawyer, looking every bit the part of the concerned father he wanted everyone to believe he was. His expression was calm, rehearsed, as if he had spent hours practicing how to look like the hero in his own story. Ryan's lawyer spoke first, painting him as a desperate man, one who overstepped, only because he was trying to help his struggling child. The words sounded hollow, like they were pulled straight from a script. They emphasized his income, his stable job, his big supportive family. They implied Leo belonged in that environment, as if the size of a house could ever compensate for the emotional neglect Ryan had been piling onto our son. Denise didn't flinch. She had been preparing for this. She countered with the Oak Ridge complaints, the forged signature, and Dr. Ellis's statement that sending Leo there would be inappropriate. She outlined calmly and methodically how I had blocked the enrollment not out of spite, but to protect Leo from being crushed in a place that didn't understand him. She pointed to my steady income, my flexible work, and the trust I'd set up to ensure Leo's needs were met, all of which painted me as the more stable and thoughtful parent. Ryan's testimony came next, and it felt like the air in the room grew colder. He dismissed Leo's struggles, calling them exaggerated, like I was some overprotective mother who had made up a diagnosis. "It's just my professional obsession," he sneered. His words were coated with condescension, as if he believed his version of reality should be the only one that mattered. And then, as if he had completely forgotten he was in court, he said something that sent a ripple of tension through the room. "My kid's smart enough to know better," he muttered, shaking his head. "He's not some defective little thing who needs special treatment." I didn't even realize the mic was still on, but the judge did. She paused, her eyes narrowing as she looked over her glasses at Ryan. "Could you please repeat what you just said, Mr. Carter?" Ryan's face turned white. He stammered, trying to backpedal, but the damage was done. Denise simply raised an eyebrow, a slight smile playing at the corner of her lips. "No further questions," she said, her voice calm but knowing. She had just sealed his fate. The judge deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but when she spoke, the words were clear. She awarded me primary physical custody with joint legal custody, but made it very clear that any major educational or medical decisions had to be made with my agreement. She specifically barred Ryan from sending Leo to Oak Ridge and ordered him to attend parenting classes focused on neurodiversity. As we left the courtroom, Ryan was seething. His face was flushed with rage, and as we passed each other, he hissed, "You turned the court against me." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The judge had already heard the truth, straight from Ryan's own mouth, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Today, I know that was the moment everything shifted. Ryan's attempts to control the narrative had backfired. The truth at last had been heard. Ryan always liked to boast about how his company adored him for being the family man. He'd lean back in his chair, sip his coffee, and talk about how his strong family values made him an ideal candidate for promotions, high-profile campaigns, and client meetings. He wore it like armor, flaunting his perfect life as if it was the reason he deserved everything he had. A few weeks after the custody hearing, that image started to crack. It began with a video, a TikTok from a cousin. The audio was muted, but the visuals were damning. Ryan at the family dinner, angrily grabbing for my phone, me trying to shield Leo from him. The tension in the room was palpable. I didn't think much of it at first. It was a family video, after all. But then, someone leaked the unmuted version to a parenting forum, and that's when everything unraveled. The unmuted version had Ryan's voice clear as day. "He embarrasses me," he said. The he was Leo, his own son. That simple sentence, spoken with so much disdain, was enough to make everyone rethink the carefully curated family man image Ryan had spent years building. It wasn't a viral sensation, but the video spread. A coworker, clearly uncomfortable with what they saw, showed it to HR. The company, known for its inclusion campaigns, wasn't thrilled that one of their leading figures had been caught on camera belittling his child. I didn't know the details right away, but it was clear something had shifted. Ryan came home that evening looking drained, like he'd been through a war. HR had called him in, questioning him about the video, about Oak Ridge, and about the court case. He tried to spin it, calling it a private family matter, a petty dispute that didn't belong in the workplace. He even accused me of manipulating the footage. But HR had the court documents. They knew exactly what was going on. Within a week, Ryan was pulled from a major campaign he had been leading for inclusive youth sports. Clients started distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with a man who had been caught on video calling his son an embarrassment. His family man image had cracked, and no amount of PR could put it back together. Months later, Ryan was quietly demoted. The company restructured, but anyone with eyes could see the truth. He was relegated to a regional role with less pay and almost no public-facing responsibilities. He blamed me, of course, told anyone who would listen that I had dragged his name through the mud. The truth was, he did all the talking that mattered. I only provided the context. Meanwhile, my own work picked up. More parents sought me out for consultations. Dr. Ellis referred families. Advocacy groups invited me to speak, initially anonymously, about navigating systems with neurodivergent children and complicated spouses. The contrast between our work and our understanding of family values was impossible to ignore. Today I know that Ryan's downfall wasn't my doing. It wasn't me who ruined his career. He did that all on his own, piece by piece, every time he chose his image over his son. Months after the court hearing, Leo looked at me one evening, his small hands nervously twisting my sleeve. "Mom, Dad doesn't take me to the fun places anymore." I furrowed my brow, confused. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "He says people look at us weird. Dad gets mad when people look at me." My stomach turned. He was 7, too young to be carrying that kind of weight. But even at that age, I could see how the world had begun to shift around him, how Ryan's bitterness had started to affect Leo, too. Ryan's behavior wasn't just changing the way he treated Leo. It was now changing how Leo saw the world, how he saw himself. Ryan's demotion at work was the first crack in his carefully constructed image. It didn't take long for everyone to find out, even if no one said it out loud at family gatherings. He showed up late, distracted, his usual charm replaced by sarcasm. I could hear him muttering about cancel culture and judgmental people, as if they were to blame for his falling from grace. His coworkers began to distance themselves. Invitations to work events dwindled. A few friends pulled him aside privately to tell him how his actions had crossed a line, especially regarding Oak Ridge. One even reached out to me, apologizing for doubting my side, but Ryan couldn't accept it. In his mind, the world had wronged him, not the other way around. Then there were his attempts to date. According to Jenna, who kept her distance from the drama, his reputation followed him wherever he went. In a small town like ours, people remember. Women Googled him, found the court summaries, the leaked video. "He embarrasses me." Those words were there for anyone to see. His dating life fizzled out before it even started. When it came to his time with Leo, it wasn't any better. At first, the court supervised their visits, making sure Ryan followed the rules. But eventually, those visits became unsupervised. Ryan tried to bond with Leo through sports. Sports Leo hated. Baseball, soccer, things that made Leo feel out of place, uncomfortable. Every time Leo stimmed, every time he refused eye contact, Ryan's frustration grew. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. Leo came back from those visits quieter, withdrawn. I could see how it affected him. We talked about boundaries, about feeling safe, even with your own father. Ryan, however, didn't learn. His career was stagnating, and no amount of anger or blame could change that. He bounced between roles at work, never regaining his former position. He hit a ceiling where culture fit and public image mattered more than his skills. He blamed everyone, me, the court, soft society, for his downfall. But he never said the words that mattered. He never apologized to Leo. I watched from a distance as Ryan's world continued to shrink. At school events, he'd sit alone, his posture rigid, the same frustration visible in his every movement. At work, functions I no longer attended, I heard about his bitterness. He was still trying to hold on to something, to control what was slipping away. But his collapse wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost invisible. And in that silence, I realized just how much he had given up. Today, I understand now that he had created his own downfall. Every choice, every word was his. And in the end, it was his own doing. The first time Leo stood on that school stage, I didn't expect to feel anything as intense as I did. It was just a small moment, just a child, flapping his hands a little, trying to express himself the best way he knew how. But when the audience didn't tell him to stop, when no one stared or muttered behind their hands, I felt something inside me crack open. I cried, but not out of sadness. It was the kind of cry that comes from seeing something that was once hidden, something you didn't even know you needed to see, finally come to life. Leo was speaking, his words clear, his face bright, and no one was stopping him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't being told to quiet down, to change, to be different. 2 years later, the school's Passion Projects night came around. The gym was filled with the familiar smells of popcorn and markers, the chatter of kids and parents, the sound of tables being set up and papers rustling. Children presented their projects on everything from sharks to K-pop. But Leo chose space, of course. He stood beside his tri-fold poster board, his favorite Rocket t-shirt hugging his small frame, the one with all the little stickers plastered across the headphones he wore to block out the noise. He didn't seem to notice the stares. A few kids smiled and asked questions, clearly intrigued by his planets and the charts he'd made about black holes and stars. Leo rocked slightly on his feet, flapping his hands now and then, his voice a steady rhythm as he talked about Pluto, telling anyone who'd listen that Pluto's still a planet in my heart. The joy in his voice was almost too much to take in, and in that moment I felt hot tears slide down my cheeks, not from grief or frustration, but from pride, from something deeper. Other parents glanced over at him. Some looked confused, others impressed. And then one mom approached me later, her expression a mix of admiration and something else. "My daughter does the same things," she said quietly. "Would you mind if I got Dr. Ellis's number? I think we need help too." I hadn't expected my experience to become something that could help others. It had always felt like a burden, something I was constantly trying to protect Leo from, a weight I carried with him. But now, it was a bridge to understanding for other parents who, like me, had been struggling in silence. At home, our apartment was smaller than the house we'd shared with Ryan, but it was filled with things that made sense. Visual schedules hung on the walls, reminders for Leo to stay grounded in the chaos of the day, the familiar comfort of beanbags, weighted blankets, the clutter of my desk piled high with case notes and Zoom consultations. It was all ours. My work, once something I had to keep hidden, had grown into something stable, something that could provide for us. The trust I'd built and refused to let Ryan control funded extra supports for Leo. I even set up a small scholarship fund at his school, designed to help other neurodivergent kids find the support they needed. Ryan still had visitation, though Leo sometimes chose to skip a weekend if he was overwhelmed. The court order allowed him that choice in moderation. Denise had helped negotiate it. When Leo did go, I always sent him with his headphones, a gentle reminder. You never have to be less to make someone else more comfortable. And at night, when I locked up the apartment, I'd pass the framed incorporation certificate from my old startup, the one I'd sold quietly. Beneath it hung a photo of Leo in his rocket shirt, grinning widely. Both of them, the certificate and the photo, were proof of something I'd always known. I had always known how to build something from nothing. I just had to remember that I could. Today, I know that watching Leo grow into himself, watching him stand proud in his own skin, was the moment I realized how far we had come. I didn't just protect him. I built a life for us both, and that life, more than anything, was mine. Ryan once said our son embarrasses him. For a long time, I thought the shame was ours to carry. I thought we were the problem, Leo with his quirks, his different ways of seeing the world, and me, always caught between defending him and trying to make everything fit into the neat little box Ryan expected. But now I know better. The shame never belonged to us. It belongs to those who can't see past their own reflections. I sit on the couch, the soft hum of the laptop the only sound in the room. My fingers hover over the keys, the title of the blog post flashing on the screen, "When Your Child's Existence Offends Someone, How to Walk Away." It's for a parent advocacy site, one of those rare spaces where my experience and my voice feel like they matter. Leo's in his room, building a solar system out of Legos. The rhythmic sound of his humming drifts in from the hallway, a melody that sounds better than any music. He's at peace. I let myself feel a moment of calm before my thoughts slip back to Ryan and the years of quiet, subtle betrayals. I think about the little humiliations I swallowed, one by one, the jokes at parties, the eye rolls in school meetings when Leo couldn't hold it together, the way Ryan's hand would tighten on Leo's shoulder whenever he didn't perform normally on command, the way I let him do that, the way I allowed Ryan to slip into this space where it was easier to blame Leo for not fitting into a world that wasn't made for him. I think about how much time I spent worrying about making Ryan look good, about protecting his reputation instead of focusing on making sure Leo felt safe. Safe. I wonder if I even knew what that word really meant until I saw how fragile our life had been. How long I let Ryan push us both into corners, thinking it was easier to bend than to fight. Today, I know that my job was never to protect Ryan's image. It was always to protect Leo's sense of self. The truth is, I'd been looking in all the wrong places for validation. I'd been so focused on the world outside, the one that judged and whispered, I forgot to trust that what we built together, Leo and I, was stronger than anything Ryan could ever impose on us. Money, education, connections, they only matter if you're willing to use them where they can actually make a difference. For a long time, I forgot I had that power. I was so focused on Ryan, on his career, on his shame. I let myself become small. But now I remember what I've always known. I don't need to shrink to make room for someone else's ego. Ryan will keep telling his story, no doubt. He'll say, I turned Leo against him, that I overreacted, that I ruined his career. Maybe some people will believe him. That's fine. They didn't see the enrollment papers. They didn't see the forged signature. They didn't see the look on Leo's face at that dinner, the one when Ryan called him embarrassing. I did. I live with the truth. I know it in my bones. But Leo's story, it's different. He'll grow up knowing that his brain is not a shameful secret, that meltdowns aren't moral failures. He'll learn that anyone who calls him embarrassing is telling on themselves. He'll know that his mom walked into a room full of people who agreed with that lie, and I chose him anyway, always. As I close the laptop and turn off the light in the living room, Leo's voice drifts down the hallway. Mom, come see my galaxy. I go, because that's my whole point now. I follow his orbit, not someone else's spotlight. Ryan once cared more about who was looking at us, about how we appeared, than about who was standing right in front of him. I won't make that mistake again. Not for anyone. Not for him.